Hey everybody, welcome to our podcast of BulletCatchFilms. We're here today with filmmaker Dan Lotz, or Daniel Lotz, of $5 Film School. Thank you so much, Dan, for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It was pretty cool when you reached out. I was excited to do a podcast. I actually just recorded one of my first podcasts in a while with a friend of mine. So I'm excited to kind of get back into doing podcasts. I used to do it a few years ago and I really enjoyed doing it.
So yeah, let's a lot of people like to start off with the basics. I want to start off with chlorine because when I first found out about you and your filmmaking and all of that stuff, it was very much on a Facebook group and very much with chlorine. And that was how many years ago now? Like 2, 3 years ago, or
Oh,
just
is it
longer?
was almost approaching 5 years when I posted the movie, actually.
Okay,
So I
5 years.
posted
Wow. Okay. Well, I've been a
it.
fan since 5 years ago then.
Yeah, so I filmed the movie in 2019, posted it early 2020, like right before COVID was the thing. And it was like COVID was hitting right as I posted the movie. So it was kind of this weird nexus point where like I posted something. I don't know if you're aware of Austin McConnell at all.
Yep.
He did like this big interview about it, and then the COVID thing happened, and it just like was kind of like this weird point where like I had posted a really quality thing that I thought was quality. I had a lot of promotion on it, and then just everyone was at home. So it just kind of like hit all at the same moment.
So you made an interesting comment that what you thought was quality. I know when you had tried to share your film to the world, and you were posting it in some of the Facebook groups. As a filmmaker at our level, generally, what do I create content? I try to share it out there to the general public because else who's going to
Yeah.
watch it? You can't rely on the algorithm. How do you feel that went? Getting chlorine out into the world.
Well, it was kind of like the opposite experience I had had with every other movie. Like every other movie I had posted up to that point, I was pretty much like an unknown filmmaker before Chlorine. Like no one knew who I was. Like I had before knowing Austin McConnell, I think like 400 subscribers on YouTube.
Right.
I was kind of just like in the slog a little bit, and then he had seen it. He did a video before the interview where he shouted out my trailer, and then he kind of reached out to me and was like, "Hey, like I think this is good enough for me to fly out here and like do like a whole thing on it." So most of the time I would drop things and it would get like friends and family would like it, but like that was about it. And then Chlorine dropped and there was just a mega response to it because I think the first day I dropped it, it got 13,000 people had watched it
Yep.
within the first 24 hours.
Yep.
And so it was just kind of like overwhelming a little bit because like I gained like 3,000 subscribers overnight. So I was just kind of like, what is going on? Like I didn't even really expect that. So it through the Facebook groups, through the promotion I did, it was kind of like an overwhelming success. So it was like the first time that I had like actually hit something, a little bit deeper than just like family and friends.
Is it fair to say, okay, so is it fair to say that you may have been one of the first guys through the door when it comes to being a YouTube filmmaker, or at least using YouTube as a distribution platform for low budget films?
There were guys before me about a few years, but none of them were like what I would call YouTube filmmakers. Like they would drop a film and then they would never post again. Like you'd see
Correct.
one guy who would drop a film. Like one guy I love to shout out. He's a very under known filmmaker. His name's Knives Monroe. I don't know if you're aware of him.
No,
He's
well,
a
I
really
am now.
he's a really cool guy. He dropped a film called Her Doppelganger like years before Chlorine, and it got some views, but it never like he never really like was like just posting features. I was like I think one of the first guys, like I'd say it was like pretty much me who was like the first that was kind of like, hey, what if we just exclusively distributed films on YouTube and just went that route?
Right.
So I had some conversations with now pretty famous filmmaker Joel Haver before he was famous,
Yeah.
and he was posting his films on Vimeo. And I remember being like, "Dude, like you got to get these on YouTube. Like this is like gonna be the wave." And I'm so glad I convinced him because like now he's posting just a bunch of feature films on YouTube, and it's really cool to see. But yeah, I do think I was kind of one of the first people, maybe not the actual first, but like probably the first one that used it as a marketing strategy.
To be clear, some of the it was pretty much like I would say that it was a domino effect with the early 2018 to now, where before
Yeah.
COVID, nobody did that. Everybody went through,
Yeah.
nobody was making feature films. And then all of a sudden, everybody realized, hey, a feature film is just
Yeah.
short film times three, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, which is so funny, is a short while after you've done Chlorine and, the Ramen Sucker Punch and all of these other things, you start seeing higher level YouTubers pretending that they had invented,
Yeah.
distributions on YouTube, with like Danny Gravitz and things like that. Not to discredit what they do, obviously not, but it's like there's a whole group of filmmakers on the other side of the internet,
Yeah.
that is making work. How do you feel about how you might have been one of the spearhead guys to start this sort of trend? Did you
Well,
have
I
any
think
auditions
it's
for that? Did people reach out in regards to that, or is it kind of like just like history that's unknown?
Well, I do have a lot of people that reach out. Like to this day, I actually get recognized. I actually got recognized in a restaurant once. I was at a restaurant and someone was like, "You're the chlorine guy." Like walked up to me, shook my hand. It was really weird. Surreal moment. But I do get recognized for chlorine quite a bit. Like people will reach out and be like, "Oh, you're that guy who made that movie." And I do think like on a broader scale, I am aware of a few successful or semi-famous filmmakers that are aware of like who I am just through like a friend of mine who talks to some people like that. So I do think like there it's like aware, like the people who are in the know about it, but like again, I still think it's kind of obscure where like on a big scale, like you see a film like Milk and Cereal. I don't know if you've heard of that one that blew up this year on YouTube, and it's the same thing as folk filmmaking, but like there's no sort of connection to it. Like they're not aware of it, or at least they don't seem to be aware of it.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think like subconsciously I wouldn't be surprised if other bigger YouTubers have seen that. They're just not necessarily like crediting it specifically.
You're right, right, right. So let's kind of like go back to the beginning, right? So, obviously, you wanted to be a filmmaker at some point and you started
Yeah.
making your own movies and things like that. But let's get into like kind of like the brass tacks of things. When you're sitting there at home and you've just finished the cut of Chlorine and you're trying to think of what you're going to do with it. Obviously, kind of like around the time, let's say you've even posted it to YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Like what is going through your mind, in terms of like planning out how you're going to get views not only to your channel but to your films. And this is basically a question of in the early parts of your YouTube channel before you've had the more success you've had now, like what was kind of like the ideas that were in your mind to get the people to watch and to subscribe and things like that.
Yeah. So it was weird because I started in 2017. I was married at the time, and my wife at the time was like, "You should start a new channel. Like you've been like dormant for years." And so I started this channel called 922 Films. And for the first few years, I would just post like a random short, and it
Sure.
wasn't really like there was no traction. It was just kind of like it would happen, and then I would post like 3 videos a year. And then I don't know what it was, but like one year, it was around 2019. I think I saw a filmmaker named Josh Stifter.
Okay.
If you're aware of him, he
I'm
was
writing
posting.
all of these down. Believe me,
Yeah,
links are going to be in the description to everybody Dan mentions.
so he was doing stuff on Patreon, and I was like, he was making decent money on Patreon, and I was like, I should do that too. Like, I could teach people on Patreon. So
Yeah.
I launched a Patreon, and then that sort of started getting me into posting regular. I was posting 2 videos a week for a while there, and I started getting some traction. And then I saw a video by Austin McConnell, and he was like, "Make something this summer, and if it's something really good, I might shout it out." And his like call to action was like, "Don't sit around at your pool, do something." And I
Right.
was like, "Fuck that! I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna sit at my pool and make a movie."
It's funny though because you actually did a vlog where you were sitting at your pool
Yeah,
with your
exactly.
feet in the middle of the night. Was that kind of like calling back to
Yeah,
that?
yeah, exactly. And that I kind of wanted to like sort of be like, no, I can relax and make a movie at the same time. Like I can do both.
Right.
So that was kind of like the beginning of it. And to be honest, I wish it was more planned, but like once he had taken hold of it and saw it, we had the movie like half filmed and half edited at that point. He had saw the trailer, he shouted us out, we got a bunch of subscribers, like a few hundred. And then it was like we went into overdrive mode because he was like, "Oh, I'm interested." He had called us, and he was like, I'm interested in doing a video on you guys, but like the movie has to be done. So then we went into like turbo mode. We shot the rest of it. We edited it. Actually, we had to deliver it by a specific date just so he could kind of get things rolling. And I remember that night my computer died. Like it just failed. So I had to drive over to Joel Dick's house and render the movie at his house to get it done. And it was like 6 in the morning. And me and him were both hanging out together. He was at my place. We ended up driving to his, and we listened to Roy Orbison's "I Drove All Night" while we were driving, and we almost got pulled over by the cops. It was really weird. It was a really crazy experience. We ended up getting it done, sent it to him, and then within like 2 weeks he was out there and he flew out. And then I mean, he kind of was like, oh, so you're gonna go like the Amazon route, you're gonna like put this on Amazon Prime. I'm like,
Which was
no,
a
we're gonna.
big thing to the audience. It was a big thing in that time. You distributing your films at that time was really unheard of, in
Yeah.
that pre-COVID era.
And I just told him, I said, I don't ask for anything other than for you to attach a link in like the pinned comment
Right.
to our YouTube film. And he's like, I really think that's kind of like a mistake. I think you should put it on Amazon Prime. And I'm like, I think the amount of money I will get from Amazon Prime will be like small in comparison to the growth I would get from the YouTube channel. I
Right.
don't think he totally got it at that moment, but I was like, just believe me. And then obviously it did pay off because like I got a lot more of an audience, and I've probably made a
Right.
lot more money doing the YouTube thing than I would have ever had like I just put behind that paywall. So like that was kind of like the marketing strategy, was just like, okay, we have like a ton of eyes on us. We could release this for free. Of course, we're going to lose money by like not people not paying for it, but the long term benefit is we might gain an audience, and I think we did gain like somewhat of an audience.
So when you're sitting there with chlorine, right, and you're obviously your YouTube channel starting to grow, based on, I was there, like I had finished Carbon, one of my first
Mhm.
features in 2019, and I hadn't really had a plan to sell it on Amazon because that was never something that I was thinking about doing. But like I didn't really know what to do with it. And obviously seeing chlorine out there, but then I saw chlorine, being posted in a lot of Facebook groups, right? That you yourself were posting, and your second film, I forgot what the name was. You did
Sheep
another,
theater.
yeah, that was it. That's correct. Which is, I love that one, by the way. So what is it like posting your film in filmmakers groups and then almost having a like an, I would say, almost like weird reaction, like it's a filmmaker sharing films, and somehow people don't like that in groups?
Yeah, I think one thing is like the industry is very pessimistic. I think like a lot of people like want to like kind of like if you go to like our filmmakers like the Reddit group, you will see
Yes.
like a lot of just like pessimism and like negative memes like, oh, didn't get paid, like you're giving me exposure and all this stuff.
Right, paid and
And
exposure.
and I think the folk filmmaking community is a little different. Like we're just kind of built different in that way, where it's like
Right.
I did Chlorine completely for free. No one got
Right.
paid on that movie. Like
Correct.
it was just like a fun experience that I was like, hey, and that's like 95% of my movies is like, hey, I involve someone. I'm like, hey, can you do this? Because it's like no one's getting paid on this anyways. I'm losing money doing this. Do
Right.
you want to be a part of an experience or not? And it's crazy because there are two sets of mindsets. There's people who like only want to do it for that, and there are people who want to do it for that like level of creativity just to like activate their brain because they haven't worked on a project in a while. And I don't know. I think that when you post on those groups, people get annoyed because they're like, I spent 6 years working on a feature film and it went nowhere, and this guy got a bunch of views on something he made in a summer. And I think like
Right.
people kind of get like jealous or something.
So if you were to, I guess, if you were to say, because obviously responding to comments on Facebook is much different to, responding, personally and live. Like if somebody had been on the Facebook group and see you posting and sharing your film and left a negative comment, right? And let's just group all those people together. What would you say to them, now, years down the road, when clearly there has been success with your channel and your film? What would you say to them now, in a positive or negative light, depending on what you want to say, but what would you say to them now as to why you were doing it, and just, if you were to talk to them now, I guess.
I I think I would just say like, where were you 5 years ago? Where are you 5 years now? And where am I 5 years ago? And where am I now? Like
Right.
I know a lot of people who would, you know, decry that and be like, "Oh, this is terrible." But you still look at their channel and they have 30 subscribers. They have a film that's on Amazon Prime that gets 2 reviews. It's like maybe not every one of my films has been a smash success, but like as a totality, I do feel like I built a brand around my name. So I think like I would just say like what did you do in that time period to further yourself as a brand? You know what I mean?
Mm. So kind of. Oh no, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that was it.
Oh, okay, so so I'm always the kind of guy who's like, let's judge you based on your actions, not your words, type of thing. When
Yeah.
you brought this up earlier and you said you're building your brand and things like that, what has been like what is something that is a tangible piece of success, whether it be through monetization or through subscriber base, since you started to now? Can you talk a little bit about how you have grown and what your numbers have reflected
Yeah.
over the past 5 years?
Yeah, I mean like I went from a Patreon that had literally no one on it. I mean, to I've probably generated like, and I'm this is just a guesstimate between YouTube and Patreon. I've probably generated like 10, 15 grand off of that, like over the last 5 years. And obviously, that's not a huge amount, but as a side business, as a side hustle, that's pretty awesome.
That is amazing.
I have been able to
That
travel
is
the world.
amazing.
I have been able to travel the world. I have a project that I can't talk about, but I did travel the world working on a movie that will be coming out very shortly. That's going to be a smash success, I can tell you that. And it's working with someone a lot bigger. So that'll be cool. So that's like one that I haven't told anyone about it. So this is like exclusive here.
This
But
you heard it first here on the Bullet Catch Films podcast.
but yeah, I got to go to a very fantastical place, and I don't think I would have ever been able to go there had I not like done the things that I had done. I mean, it's opened up doors. I ended up talking with some producers who worked in the Marvel universe. I've had experiences and things that have happened that have doors have been opened through the YouTube channel. Obviously, like I haven't had the big break yet, but I have had those experiences open up to me.
Well, you see, the thing is that, and this is kind of like what this channel is almost about. Is like, what is the definition of a big break, right? Because
Yeah,
you yourself have stated that you've made, a certain amount of money. And thinking about it realistically,
yeah,
let's say that it was on the higher end. Let's say it was like, $15,000. You times that by four, and you're making somebody's yearly salary.
yeah,
So you're 1/4 of the way there. And in some instances, I mean, you can definitely buy yourself a camera and a cup of coffee, with the income over the course of that time. So I mean,
yeah.
that's one hell of an achievement. And I think, based on where you started and where you are now, that is really something to be amazingly proud of, and inspirational to anybody who's making films out there.
Last year, I mean, I had gone through a really bad like time, like personally, and I ended up
Yes,
losing.
with the
I
loss of
had
your
lots,
father. Yes,
yeah,
and sorry
losing
about
my
your dad, by the
father
way. Yes,
and losing my job, and
yeah.
my Patreon was actually able to pay my rent for a couple months. So like that was amazing to like have like the community rally with me, and like I had enough of an audience that I actually was able to clear rent for a few months just doing YouTube stuff. So like it definitely adds up, and I think like people are wary like, oh, that doesn't work for small creators, but it's like you only really need like 1,000 true fans. You really only need a
Correct.
thousand people
Thousand
who are
true
going to
fans.
really be interested. And I'm like, I might not have that yet, but I might have 100, 150, 200 fans that are like diehard for me, and I know that those people will come out when I need the help.
So here's just for the audience at home. Here's a little bit of a tough question for Dan. Having as much success as you have, Dan, what has been one of the things that has held you back in terms of remaining consistent across over the fa- over the past 5 years? And this, of course, is not in relationship with the loss of your father, of course. Not speaking about that
Yeah.
time period, but many of us, who are big supporters and fans, and you yourself in a few videos have stated, you'd like to be more consistent. What is it about that problem that you feel that, in your mind you're thinking, but don't actually vocalize to us, your audience?
Yeah, I think I mean obviously having a day job does not does
Yeah,
not
okay.
make it doesn't make it easy to like work on films every day. Like obviously I'm tired at the end of the day, like any guy out there. I'm working beyond just doing my YouTube channel, so that does inhibit it. I mean, I think I'm a perfectionist sometimes. So sometimes I'm like, I don't want to drop a video unless it's good.
Right.
And that can sometimes lead to me not posting for a long period of time. I've tried to fight against that tendency. But you know, personal relationships. I'm a very passionate guy, and especially like going through like breakups or you know, like just messy situations. That stuff can like kind of get to me. So like I definitely have taken pauses when I've needed to, just to like recoup my mental health. So I think one thing that I like, my mindset, like before I used to post just no matter what. And this like year I've been a little bit more like, hey, I'm gonna like take some time for myself and just kind of build slowly and grow it. Um, but my goal is to get that consistency back, and just kind of posting like 2 videos a week would be like ideal.
Yeah, kind of staying in the business of YouTube. You know, you are one of the few filmmakers that I've seen on YouTube who's able to make money not shilling products.
Yeah. I will never shill products. I can tell you that now. It's just not my goal.
I'm not shilling products, and if I do shill products, it's going to be because I use them and I'm
Yeah.
talking shit about them or
Yeah.
loving them at the same time. Now, I'm interested to know what is your do you feel, and I know a lot of filmmakers out there, right? There's so many YouTube filmmakers who are filmmakers in the sense that like, they shoot videos, but not filmmakers in the sense that they just make films. So if you were to put yourself in their shoes, it's like how do you is it something that it's very easy to fall into, just kind of like creating product reviews and not making films? Is there a lure to that, or is it difficult enough just to get people to watch your films, and that's why people just don't just purely do films? If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think a lot of people are drawn to what is usually the get rich quick sort of schemes of like, okay, like product reviews. There's a built-in audience for that. Like people like Sony, they like Nikon, they like Red. And if you have the money or the ability to get your hands on these things, reviewing them is going to be a quick way to get views. Like I'm aware of that. I'm aware if I literally just did the Peter McKinnon, like I'm just gonna, you know, or I don't even know even if he does shill products. I don't watch any of these channels, to be honest with you. But like guys like that who like shill the products and they talk about it, I would be 10 times more successful if I did that, but I just don't want to. I don't want to sell out for that. I just don't have a desire for it. So I think like it's inherently easier to do that, but I think like ultimately for me, my channel is a reflection of me, and I would rather it be a slow build organically with things that I actually care about than like trying to like sell out to get a brand deal or something. Like I just don't care about that at all.
So would you say, I guess my next question in regards to that, who are three top YouTube filmmakers who are just filmmakers off the top of your head? Three, two, one.
So my favorite would be Joel Haver,
Mhm.
um, uh, Cody Clark, and then probably Doom Productions or RC Films. Those are all good YouTube channels that are like doing good stuff.
Awesome. Perfect. You heard it there, guys. Check out Joe Haver, Cody Clark, and Doomed Productions, all separate channels. Their links will be added in the description down below. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and change gears a little bit here. Um, a lot of people don't know this, but you are actually a Midwestern boy, believe it or not.
Yeah,
What
I
is it?
am.
What is it like being in the Midwest when it's cold? Because I'm from California and it is never cold here.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't know. I grew up in it. I don't like love it when it's like -9 out, but like I don't think anyone would. But like I feel like being a Midwesterner kind of just gives you a different perspective, because I think like everyone's like, oh, when are you gonna go to California to make movies? Like when are you gonna move out there? And I'm like, I don't want that.
Don't do that.
I don't have any desire to do that. I'm like, maybe I'll make a film, like a singular film out there, but I don't like have the strong desire. I'm like, it's such a saturated market out there. And I think they have such a different expectation. I think the industry is more, monetarily based out there. Like, okay, like I'm gonna do something. You want me to gaff on your project, you gotta pay me. You want me to do you might work, you're gonna pay me. Like you gotta go somewhere, you gotta get a permit. Like
It's interesting that you say that. Do you feel that that might be detrimental to the growth of directors and filmmakers at the starting level or at levels that are lower than Hollywood
oh
level?
yeah, 100%. I think like so many people get bogged down in like I need to pay everyone and I need to make sure like I think it's genuine. I think people want to be ethical and they want to pay people and they want to do that. I've come from the perspective of like I'm a broke filmmaker. Every dollar I have, I put back into the films. I put it into the gear, I put it into food for the crew, whatever it is, I'm putting it every bit of money I do have into the product. And I would rather not lie to the actors and be like, hey, I'm gonna be able to pay you 3 grand for this when I just don't have that money. I think people try to be ethical about that, but I think the problem is that at the beginning level, you like a band. Like when you're like in a band, the band doesn't charge each other to be in the band. Like, oh, the bass drummer doesn't charge the guitarist to be in his band. They all just kind of come together on this like mutual agreement, like, oh, we're gonna make stuff and then hopefully on spec it'll do good and then we'll all be rich. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like how a band is formed, but like on filmmaking it's different. Like everyone views it like a transaction, and I don't know, I always felt like that was kind of antithetical to like art.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, right? So obviously there is this huge kind of like, I would say sometimes it even gets to a war.
Yeah.
You leave one $300 a day PA job on a Facebook group in LA, and there's 60 comments, none of which are people applying to you, right? And but
Yeah.
you're saying now to the audience, to myself and everybody, that at a certain level you shouldn't pay anybody. You should just do it as a collaboration. Let's go ahead and like let's pretend we're making the next Dan Lotz movie. Dan Lotz, lots of Dan or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go ahead and make that movie, shall we? What is it? Let's think about the process, right? So how do you start that process? And obviously let's go beyond that. Let's go past the script writing and like the concept stage. When you starting to crew and cast it, what is your general approach? And let's say we're trying to make a film that has like a 10-person cast and you need some crew. Like let's
Yeah.
start there. Like how you approach your way, your method of doing things, especially when you're not paying people.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's like weird, it's like vibes based. So like I'll just kind of like pick up on a vibe. Like usually I create a story with certain people in mind and I kind of like throw out little darts before then. So like I made a movie called Picking Up the Pieces with my friend Josh Horvath, and we had never made any movies together. He had just done a lot of posters for me,
Yeah.
but like we had always said like we're gonna do a movie, and I was just like, "You're perfect for this. Like you're literally the exact person I need for this." And he's
Yeah.
like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "No, I am 100% sure." And it was such a good movie. In fact, in terms of like how we filmed it, we only did one take for every scene because it was so on point and things were so the energy and the chemistry was so on point. We never had to do like run a bunch of takes because I just was like always happy with how it turned out. So I think it's usually just kind of that vibe of like trying to find people that I know personally who would work. And that doesn't mean like actors. Like I don't usually go to like casting websites to cast people. Like I usually am just like, oh, I have a friend who I like who would be great in this. They don't act, but I'll convince them to act in this or something
Right.
like that. You know what I mean? So like that's usually how I go about it, is like finding people in my life who would fit the roles for certain things, and then hopefully they're as interested in as I am. And I've never really had problems getting people to be in it. I think a lot of people are just flattered that like, oh, you want me to be a main character? Like that's cool.
So when it comes, okay, so what you're saying to us is that for your projects, you're usually casting people who are within your circle who
Yeah.
may want to be a part of the journey that you're taking, correct?
Yeah.
Now,
Correct.
are you tailoring your films or like are you kind of not necessarily tailoring, but like moving your film so that it kind of like fits with whoever is going to be a part of it? Or are you taking the story and just cramming people in? Because I've seen it done both ways, and I personally have done it both ways. I mean, and
Yeah.
how would you or how would you say that how
Every movie that I've made, sans my movie The Long Con, um, every movie I've made, it's improv style. So I
right,
like the way that I get people involved is like they are the film. Like so I'll have an idea, like
right,
chlorine, like okay, I knew what I was gonna do in it. I didn't know what everyone else was like. I kind of had roles for them, but I was like, just be yourself, just like be you, and then I'll figure it out while I'm writing it, while we're in the middle of the process of doing it. So usually it's like I'll see someone like, okay, like I was going to the vape shop the other day, and there's this girl there, and I'm like, she's gonna be in a movie of mine. I don't know how I'm gonna convince her, but I'm like, she's just like the perfect character for a movie, and I can see a whole story just around that already. I just go around and I'll see people, and I'll just be like, oh yeah, that's like an actor right there. I don't know how to, like, my brain does that, but like it just kind of like I see people and I get stories just around them specifically, and then it's just like me figuring out a way how to like get them involved in it. So
So if I wanted to be cast in a Dan Lotz movie, I should hang out at vape shops all the time.
yes, exactly.
There you go. Well,
It's vibes based. It's weird. I think like a lot of people want to go to like the casting sites because it is easier, and obviously at some point I might have to, just because it's like a more, quick transactional way to get a lot of people to be interested. But I'd say like 95% of it is just like vibes based, like trying to find someone who fits something.
So it's funny you use the word transactional, right? So are you trying to focus, or when you, I guess, in your process of making your films, are you looking for people who are less interested in this being like one for me, one for you type of thing, and more like trying to be a part of the Dan Lotz experience, I guess you might be able to say?
Yeah, I mean, I love when I can like find someone like a kindred spirit, like someone who gets me, like who
Right,
gets like what I'm trying to do.
right.
Like I have a an actress, actually one of the only people I did meet on a casting website. Her name's Anna. She was in The Long Con. She's in Chlorine. She's in
Shout
a
out to
lot of.
Anna.
She's awesome, and like I think she just gets what I'm doing. Like, you know what I mean?
Right,
Like there's certain people that they just understand, like, okay, this guy wants to make art and he wants to involve me in the art and he's gonna make a good quality product and it's gonna get released. I think one thing that's like super under talked about, because I think it's changed since we've gotten like since it's like the as the years have progressed, more people I think have been better about releasing their stuff. But there was a time where like indie filmmakers would make something and it would just be on their hard drive like forever.
right, correct.
Like, or it would be on some obscure website where you couldn't find it, and then you'd never see the movie again. And I
Right.
think that's one thing that is really empowering about like doing the YouTube thing, is just like it's out there and people can actually see it.
Okay, that's interesting. So like when, okay, so you had made a mention of like when you're creating your films and finding people with the same vibes, and also like films that end up on hard drives. What is something that, do you have like something in your mind that you're gonna say, hey, if you join me on a film of mine, you're gonna get this? Or how do you make it beneficial for the people who are donating their time and their resources to you?
Yeah, I mean, I usually will promise, say like, hey, you're gonna get fed when we're on set. You're
Okay.
gonna get a finished movie. You're gonna get credits for it, like on IMDb, Letterbox, whatever.
Yeah.
Usually, and then I like to say like I have an audience. There is, I can't guarantee every film's gonna do well,
Right.
but like I have an audience where it's like if you are an actor and you're craving like actually getting people to see your work, this is your chance. Like there is a chance that this could get views. This is like based on what I'm doing.
Yeah, right.
And also I will tell people like, especially a lot of times the actors I like to work with are like newer, or like they're in the industry and they've
Sure.
never done a feature film before. And I'll be like, who else is offering you a chance to like be a lead character in like
Right. That's fair.
a feature length story? Like you're gonna
Right.
be like you're gonna get 75 minutes of screen time where you're on almost every scene.
Yeah.
Like why not? Like what do you have to lose other than, or you could do a bunch of short films
Yeah.
for 10 more years, you know what I mean?
The films that you make are actually very unique, and have a very unique sense of style, color grade, tone, pace, and editing, right? Would you say that, or at what point, or hang on, let me try to rephrase this question because I'm not making sense in my head. Would you say that you have found your thematic and visual style, or are you still kind of like an exploratory phase of your filmmaking career?
I mean, I think like I have like the Dan staples. Like I feel
Right,
like if you tune into one of my movies, I think you can kind of tell it's one of my movies.
right,
I think whether or not that'll change, that's to be seen yet, just because like I'm kind of like exiting like a phase of my career. Like I feel like it started with Chlorine, and I think with Chlorine Kills, that's kind of going to be
right,
the bookend
right,
to like this era of like I've produced almost 30 feature films at this point. Um and I feel like in the style that I've done it, I think I have pushed it to the max on chlorine kills. Like I'd say like going from where I started to where I am, that was all one chapter. And I think I'm starting to look at filmmaking a little differently in terms of what I want to achieve with it. And but in terms of that style, I think that's going to be a whole new phase where I'm going to be exploring different kind of palettes.
So filmmaking, with you, the very interesting set of words you just said. You've reached the maximum of where your filmmaking is for this before you start exploring new stuff. What are you referring to, or what are you hoping to change? What type of things are you hoping to like kind of like bring next to your channel and to your career as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I think for me it's mostly like been like a like me centric sort of like I'm in the stories, I'm
Right.
usually the lead character or a main character. um it's usually like very improv, no script, very like bare bones. And I'm kind of working with the idea of like maybe either combining that with more scripting, combining that with more actors that are not myself, sort of taking it to a new wave of filmmaking where it's kind of blending what I have already done, but with like a little bit more polish, a little bit more like more grandiose, I guess would be the word.
Gotcha, gotcha. Do you feel like by changing that up, we'll lose some of that Dan Lotz signature style that you have with your films? Because I can say for my own thing, I've in the last 3 years, I've only managed to work on one movie, and total since 2019, I've only done three, and that's because they're fully scripted and all that stuff. And it's just such a pain in the ass to get through
Yeah.
sometimes, you know what I mean? Especially when you're trying to do things at such a level. And yeah, I guess my question to you would be is like, why move away from that? Do you feel, or why do you feel that you've reached? You said it yourself. You've reached kind of like the maximum that you could with this art form, or with your
Uh,
style of filmmaking.
yeah, so I think the reason why is because I want to do what I'm doing, but at a bigger scale. And I don't think that means less films. Like I'm actually ramping up to make probably the most films I've ever made
Right,
going forward. So I think it's taking what has worked, which is like producing a lot of stuff, but the stories have been very personal and very not limited, but like they're very like introspective. And
right,
I like doing those type of stories, but I think that like I could take that to a bigger scope and potentially attract a whole new audience. I think that my films really play to like what my base likes. Like
right.
people like the Dan kind of, I just call it like the sad boy Dan thing. Like it's just the thing that I do, and I think people like that. But I'm like, hey, maybe it'd be cool if I was a character in a movie, not the main character. Maybe
Right,
it'd be cool if I was a part of the story, but not the whole thing.
right,
And treating me as more of like adding some spice in there rather than like the whole meal. If
right,
and
right, right,
so
right,
and
exactly.
I think like totally new tones and vibes could be created if I'm like bringing in new people. And I think I'm just ready to expand to like a new set of people to kind of like work on these projects with.
So when it comes, that's a great point, Dan. And a question, kind of like bouncing off of that. So where you'd mentioned that like you're ready to take yourself out of being like the lead and the center focus of your stories. Is that because you've reached a certain point of your life that you felt like you've expressed, yourself personally enough, and now are wanting to do something else, or is this purely a commercial reason that you're saying, hey, maybe I should try to expand my reach as a director type of thing?
I think it's more artistic than commercial. Like I think like it would obviously have more commercial appeal to like bring other people in, but like I think it's more of an artistic thing. Like the way I made stories up until this point, like it's exhausting. Like I'm not gonna lie to you. Like a lot of my films are
I'm
very
tired.
like
Yeah,
a lot of my films are very personal and they refer
right.
to very personal things that actually
Correct.
happen in my real life. I have a very meta sense with my movies where like
Sure.
my
Yes.
real life problems usually seep into the movies. And I think it's like at a point where like there was a few projects where like that actually caused problems in my real life. Like and I think it was for me a little bit, it's a little easier for me to like walk away from that and be like, okay, that was a time in my life where I made these very, very ultra personal movies, but perhaps it's better to take those more personal feelings and obfuscate them with like a little bit more, window dressing, make them a little bit more grander, make them a little bit more, you know, like you said, maybe more consumer friendly in a certain way, and not necessarily trying to suffer the quality of them, but just to try to package that a little differently.
Would you say then, because you'd mentioned that the films had affected your real life, is that why that you might say, or would it be fair to say that somehow creating these films and because they're personal might have been affecting then yourself to kind of like slow down at times to take breaks and not be as consistent with, is that a problem?
Yeah, I
Problem?
mean, 100%. I mean, there are certain movies. Okay, like I was going through a divorce when I was making my film "Tell Me You Love Me," which is a
Right.
film about me and my at the time a wife breaking
Right.
up. It was a movie. It was a breakup movie that happened right before we filmed it. Right before we like actually got divorced.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear
Um,
that.
so yeah, I mean, it was just a hard movie to like make because like it wasn't just my emotions in it. It wasn't just me in it. It was like another person and their life in it too. And I think like I love the fact that I have that movie. Like I like it's one of my all-time favorites that I've ever made. But like it's one of those things where it's like I don't know if I want that level of personal to always be on my channel. You know what I mean? Like I kind of want to step away from that a little bit just so that I have like a little bit of like perspective, if that makes sense.
Right. That does make sense. So now that we're going into the personal stuff, I can turn off this interview hat and let's just talk. Let's just talk director to director, man to man.
Yeah.
Um, the is it tiring doing what you do?
Yeah. I mean, like I do feel like it's weird because like the whole folk filmmaking thing, like it was tiring because it's like I kind of felt like a lot of people were like, oh, you're like a voice in this community and you kind of have to be like on point and like make these films and do all these projects. And I definitely got tired. I got burnt out, especially like last year. Like I just walked away from it basically entirely. Um, but yeah, it does get tiring to make all these projects. But like, I'm kind of like a workaholic, so
Mm.
I like the work, having the work as well. So like it's kind of hard to balance like having none of it, it doesn't feel good, and then having a lot of it doesn't also feel good because I'm just like overloaded. Just trying to find that weird healthy balance.
Would you say that perhaps that being your authentic self up until this point has led you to the success you've managed to have up until this point?
Yeah, I think like at some level, if I hadn't like made movies like Chlorine or something like that, where like it's just like I literally was just like, we're not gonna like dress me up as like a cool hitman. Like I'm just gonna dress up how I am, and we're just gonna like be myself. And the way we're gonna talk is how me and my buddies would talk to each other.
Yeah.
And in other films, like being way more personal than that. Yeah, I do think it was a huge element to like why I've been successful up to this point. For sure.
Interesting. Do you regret being so personal, or has that like I guess from like a social perspective, a social media perspective, has that ever come to bite you in the ass? You know, not.
Um, yeah. I mean, I've definitely had some difficult conversations with some people who have been involved in the films.
Hmm,
And it has like one of the films, like someone who was involved like really wanted me to take it down. Like they
right,
really wanted me, and I was just like, no, we agreed to make this movie. Like, I'm sorry you backed out on it now, but like
right,
the movie's the movie. Like
right,
it lives up there. You don't have to watch it if you don't want to.
right, right.
Um, but like, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's hard.
Being the guy who kind of like coined, because I think folk filmmaking you coined, if I'm not mistaken, was it?
So
Oh, did you?
my newest podcast I'm doing, the guy who I'm talking to, he was the one who first said folk filmmaking, but he
Okay,
didn't know. So I was talking to this guy. We were at a Chick-fil-A. He's like one of my best
Chick-fil-A. Yeah,
friends.
that's good.
And he literally watched Chlorine and he goes, that's some folk filmmaking shit right there. And
Mm,
then I went home that day and I went, folk filmmaking. That like stuck in my head. So he never like thought about it twice. He just said it and it just went on.
Who
And
is
I
this
was the
who
one.
is this mystery man? So it goes down in the record books.
So his name is Aaron Carter. We're doing a whole podcast. He'll be coming out in a couple days.
Okay, nice.
So he's gonna get like a bunch of attention from that, hopefully. But yeah, he's like the one who kind of like, I guess, originally said it, but he never connected it with, like, I was the one who kind of connected it with the filmmaking movement itself. He just happened to be the first person to say, "Oh, that's folk filmmaking," and it's something about when he said that just stuck in my brain as like, "Oh, that's a great idea."
Hmm. So, like when it comes to other people and the full film, man, folk filmmaking movement, and that something that you helped create and inspire. How do you feel that it has been going so far with everything that you had originally hoped to achieve and have achieved thus to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it was like explosive at first. Like I felt like everyone was doing it, and it was felt like the movement was really like rocketing. And then I think like like any movement, it has its lulls. I think like last year, it was just like deader than dead. Like I just felt like no one was making stuff. I didn't think, to be honest, I didn't think there was many people making good stuff. Like there was things being made, but it just wasn't like the quality of that like I had kind of been, accustomed to. But I think like it has its waves. I think like 2024, there's been a lot better stuff coming out. There's a lot of good stuff, and I think a lot of people were working on stuff in the background. I do think it feels like there's a groundswell. Like I don't know how to describe it other than like you just tap into a certain vibe and you just feel it. Like I feels like 2025, everyone's kind of ramping up, making better quality stuff, and it seems like everyone's going to be dropping a big release next year. So I have a feeling that if
Myself
folk
included.
filmmaking, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like if I was going to predict that folk filmmaking has any sort of like giant like attention to it, I think it'll happen next year.
Interesting, interesting. So, when it comes to the folk filmmaking community, you've been the spearhead of it, but also taken a lot of flack for it,
Yeah.
especially at the pace that you create your films. And, we've seen, obviously people, all lots of people giving you unbelievably positive attention in regards to your films. But some also people have been very critical of some of your work. Is anything they say fair or unfair, or what would you like to say to anybody who says, Dan, just, create stuff or whatever they might say? Like, I'm not going to name specific things you say. You already know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? What would you say to them or to the community at large as to your intention behind your work, I guess? Because I think so much of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think like anything is fair when you put something out there. Of course, someone is able to review it and give their opinion on it. And like, I think the intention with my work has always been to be just like very much transparently like, I am a filmmaker. I am growing as a filmmaker, and here is like watching a filmmaker work through his filmography, watching someone refine a craft through each film that he posts. And I hope, I don't know if every film I make is better than the last one. I've been famously quoted for saying with all my friends that I don't try to make a better movie every time. I try to make a different one, because I think like it can be toxic to always be like, hey, I'm gonna make the best thing. The last thing sucked. This thing's gonna be so much better, because sometimes it's just not. Like sometimes you make a different thing and it has a totally different goal in mind. Like with a film like Chlorine, I was very targeted on trying to make like a calling card. With other films, like okay, like my film Winner, it was to capture a very specific moment in time, and obviously I knew that wasn't gonna garner as much attention as a movie like Chlorine because it's only made in one night. So I think it's kind of like one of those things where I hope that people who view my channel and who view my work can see that like this is just someone being very authentic and posting stuff without sort of any like barring of the community. The community is a part of it. They're informing my decisions, good and bad. Like people who love it and people who hate it have inspired me to make better work, I think. And like I know like one critique I've gotten a lot is like the pacing on my movies. Like some people just don't like it. Um and it's one of those things where like that's, if you've noticed any of my newer movies, they're a lot shorter. They're a lot shorter than the ones that started out, because I was like, hey, I can make the pacing a little bit better if I trim off 20, like my newest film, Sheepland, was an 80-minute movie. And I was talking with one filmmaker. He's like, that's like a 60-minute movie. And then I was like, you know what? You're right. And I trimmed off 18 minutes out of it, and it was way better for it. So I think like I definitely am someone who listens to criticism. And I do think like the platform of YouTube, that forum allows you to really become a better filmmaker.
I think that's literally going to be the highlight of this conversation, Dan. That was a great fucking answer, you know. Um when it comes to like yourself and like, kind of like yourself and the folk filmmaking trend, and being a filmmaker and things like that, what would you say are things that you can actually or there what are something that you can actually take credit for in terms of like, or that you allow yourself to be given credit for, when you're out there in the world, and things that you would say, hey, that might be true about me, but it's better to not vocalize that publicly, I guess it's like, what are your rules for your own self, promotion or aggrandizement, do you try, or how would you advise other filmmakers even to kind of like, oh, don't gloat, don't do this, don't do that, what would you say,
Yeah.
you know
I mean, I try to be like, I'd say relatively humble, like on my platform. Like I don't try to like act like I'm bigger or better or smarter or more talented than anyone else. I mean, my dad used to always have this saying, which was like, I don't care if you're the most talented, the most smart, the most gifted. All I care is that you work 150% harder than anyone else. And that's kind of the mindset I've always gone into anything with, but especially creativity, is just working at my absolute hardest, and letting the work speak for itself. I there are other filmmakers in the community that are a little bit more sorry, I don't know if my connection can't cut out.
um,
Someone tried to call me.
Oh, no, no, you're good. I'm still
Oh,
here.
yeah. Yeah, no, there are other filmmakers in the community. I have seen people who get a little braggadocious about how good their stuff is, or like how amazing. I let the work speak for itself.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, people know when something is good. Like when they see something that's a mic drop, you don't have to announce it. It just shows up.
Well, for your work, there definitely is a very, very built-in community. And for anybody watching this, Dan might get like, let's say, 800 views on the video, but that's not where the real value comes in, to anybody
Yeah.
watching this. The real value comes in to the 50 comments that are in those
Yeah.
videos. And those are real people who are really engaged with what you're doing. So hats off to you, because, for some of us, myself included, it is very much the inverse of that, where it's kind of like, oh, yes, I can spend, a year making Night Hunter, but if no one's going to leave a comment or engage, then what's the point? There's no audience there, and it's more transactional versus more personal. And so I think, as a testament to your accomplishments thus far, this point in your career and your life, just being able to actually get people who give a fuck about what you're doing and saying should definitely be, you know, uh, not dismissed, and definitely
Yeah,
to
and
heart.
I feel very grateful for the fact that like I have a community of people that does care, because I know that isn't something that like everyone gets to have. And it's nice to have like a little space where like if I post something, I might not get like that. Like there was probably points in my career where I had more audience, but I do feel like on a general level, I feel pretty engaged with like the people. Like when I post it, I know there's going to be 75 people who will comment on a film and be like, yeah, that's great.
I would rather have 80 comments on Night Hunter than 100,000 views on Night Hunter. That's the truth, regardless of what people might have thought of the movie, And with
Yeah.
the upcoming movie that I've got coming out, the Western or neo-Western that I'm doing, like we'll see what happens with that. But I think a lot of filmmakers do see that, when they stumble across it, they talk about your work because clearly, out of all the channels you see out there, there is definitely an engagement, with what you're doing, so
Yeah.
kudos to you in terms of that. In regards to talking about your work generally, what I wanted to kind of address is how did that style, the improv style, come to be? Was it an actual, or I guess my question would be, is like when you first started out making Chlorine and all these other films, is the style necessitated on what you actually wanted to do, or was it simply because you didn't have the resources to do it, so therefore improv made more sense, to make? Was it a style first or a necessity then style after? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I had made a film called Long Con. I wrote it. It was like a script. It was
Yes,
like a
correct.
whole, yeah, and if people have seen it, I mean, it's like it's a movie. Like I like it, but it's not
It's a
like my
movie.
favorite.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
movie.
movie. It's a
Yeah,
movie I made.
it's a movie.
It was a very, very arduous process, very long, very tiring. Spent 4 years on it. Um, and then I saw Joel Haver's film Island. It was all improv, and I was just blown away that I was like, this guy just like talked to random people on the street, and this is so much more engaging than like anything I've seen.
Yeah.
It just was just like super engaging, and I was like, I love the idea of improv, and I'm like, I don't know if I have the level of confidence to go just talk to random people and like turn it into a movie. But I'm
Yeah.
like, I do like the idea of improv being a thing. Like, I love the idea of it like being spontaneous and not controlled and not, calculated. It's just like one moment that you can't like really get back. And I like that. So I think that was where the style kind of came from, was just because it was like it felt fresh. It felt fresh to me to be like starting a film and not knowing where it was concluding. Like starting a film and not knowing. There's so many deleted chlorine scenes. It's hilarious. Like
That should
there's
be a YouTube
probably
video right there. I'd love to see some of those scenes.
there's like a scene where Pool Boy gets really high. There's like a scene where Pool Boy is like out in the middle of the night and he's like smoking a cigar and he's like talking to people. And there's so many different weird scenes because I was just crafting the movie as I was going along and I didn't know what it was gonna be about. So
Right.
I just kind of like was just going in on a journey trying to find that out. And I love that part about the improv filmmaking, is not necessarily knowing where it's going yet.
So let's talk about some of the technical stuff that I'm very curious about as we start ending the end of our discussion journey here. When it comes to like your films itself, you have a very unique color palette and style, right? Is that color palette or how did you come to that style? Was it just like you're just gonna like you just were figuring things out, or did you always kind of like the old filmic look? And when it comes to camera choices and lenses, like are you just shooting on what you got, or did you intentionally choose to shoot on the Blackmagic and or the Sony or whatever camera you're using? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so the color palette,
Because your
I ended
coloring
up
is fairly consistent across your films, you know,
I
in terms
only
of
use
style.
one. I've only used one LUT over basically every film, with the exception of a few.
Holy shit! There you go. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one LUT that I use. I'd say
You
on
heard it here,
about.
guys. The Dan Lot.
Yeah,
That's
I have talked about it on my channel. It's there's a company. It's called Tropic Color.
oh
Uh,
yeah. The
they have a LUT, and it's called Marlin. It's spelled Marlyn. It's not a
yeah,
promo for them.
Jacob Owens
Yeah,
channel.
and
Yes.
I absolutely love that LUT. It looks so beautiful and it renders all of it so nicely. I have used it on basically every movie. There's some exceptions, like the black and white ones I've done,
Yeah.
or ones that just called for a different look. But I've used it basically as like a kind of like the baseline where I start and then I tweak the colors from there. But that's why the look is pretty fairly consistent, because I've just like I'm weird. Like for the longest time, I even had a rule that all my films were 239.
Yeah.
They're like, if like in
Yeah.
almost everyone is, there's a few that aren't, but that was like more of a late game development. Like for the most part, almost all my films are 239. They use the same color grade. They're mostly all shot on the Sony A7 III. Um, we have been experimenting with Joel got the red Komodo. I think it's the red
Yeah.
Komodo.
Red Komodo. That's
Yeah,
actually what I
so
work on.
yeah, so we shot our film Goody Two Shoes on that, Chlorine Kills on that, Chlorine Reminiscing on that. Was there any other ones? Also Paul's Garden. So that's like kind of like the new camera we're using.
Yeah.
I like it. Sometimes I hate it. It's kind of like I kind of like the Sony a little bit more, because like the Red Komodo is just a big fucking camera, man. Like
It's huge.
it's huge. You can't go anywhere. Everyone looks at you, and
It's not conspicuous if that's what you're aiming for.
yeah, it's just like bulky, and like I do like it, and it does like look really good. But like there's limitations. It's not great with low light. It's not really like the best quality. So I don't know.
So 2 points just for all of our audience members who are looking for a Komodo. This is pretty much as small as I could get it.
Yeah.
With
And our rig is nowhere near as small as that.
like
Joel's rig is just massive. Like when I had to shoot on Goody Two Shoes because I did the cinematography on that one, I was dying. I was just dying on that movie. I was like,
it's heavy. Look, watch, listen, guys. Watch, hang on. Like that was the weight. It moved my computer screen. So yes, Joe. So Dan's mentioned Tropic Color. That is actually Jacob Owens for anybody who doesn't know, and he runs Prism FX and Tropic. I think this company's called Tropic Color. We actually did have the opportunity to shoot at his studio in Los Angeles, and we're doing an interview with him fairly soon. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, he's got a.
Well, if you get to talk to him, thank him for me because I
will tell him Dan
Lotz
Lotz.
so much.
Yes, Dan Lotz's films. Yeah, correct. So when it comes to like your choice of lenses, are you just using the lenses you've got, or are you trying to pick different lenses for each project?
This is gonna sound like heresy when I say this.
I can't wait to hear this. This is where we coming for heresy right here.
Like, and it's gonna sound so bad because it's gonna sound so uncultured when I say this. I don't really give a fuck about lenses that much. I just don't. Like, I'll use what I have. I still use the Canon. I use the Canon kit lens on some movies. Like, still.
Hey, that's the style, man. That's so cool. Yeah, fuck it. Yeah, that's your style.
Like, I mean, again, we use Rokinons. We have some cinema lenses, and they're nice, and like I like them. But like, I can't. Like, I'm not like if you're pixel peeping that much, and you're like looking at the screen, and you're like, is that a Rokinon, blah blah blah, or is that a Cine Prime, or all this stuff? I'm like, I don't fucking know, dude. Like, that's just kind of how I am. So like,
I fucking know, guys.
Yeah, I just not a lens guy. Like I would love to be. I just don't have like the budget to like be thinking about all these lenses. Cool. I just kind of just use what I have. You know, maybe down the line if I had a bigger budget, I'd be more like precise about stuff like that. But usually I don't like get like super in depth with it.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's cool. No.
I have a Canon 35 that's basically almost every one of my movies is shot on. It's just like this little cheap $600 lens, and I don't know. It's been like my favorite.
Man, I started with the kit lenses until I got some of the other stuff. You know, I don't have a whole lot of variety of glass, but I can say that I use two pieces of glass normally. For Night Hunter, I shot it on the Sony A7S II with the Zeiss Novus 50 mil, and I shot the entire movie on just that lens and that on that camera. And then Carbon, I rented a red because I got like a deal. Like it was like 2 weeks for $300 from some guy. It was like, it's unbelievable. So I shot that on those ice, and then for Land of Wolves, I was using these new Serio, T29 anamorphic lenses, for the Komodo. Like
that's cool.
Yeah. But when it comes to when you guys are, I'll tell you one thing. When there is a misconception that the red Komodo is bad in low light, I will tell you how to fix that problem. Just a piece of advice, if you want it. If you set the ISO in the dark at 250.
Yeah.
And open your aperture all the way up, you'll be able to see in the dark. Almost.
Yeah.
So a lot of the misconception with the apertures and day and night for the red, because I spoke directly. I went to Cine Gear this year and I spoke directly to the guys at Red. They say when you're shooting in the dark, set your ISO as low as possible. When you're shooting outside and it's bright, set your ISO to like 1280. And
yeah. That's kind of weirdly how the Sony is too sometimes, where like it seems like reverse or even Black Magic. Like
that's correct.
There's like certain specific ISOs that are like ones that you want to have. Like, and I leave that to Joel. Joel's the tech guy, so I'm like, just do what you got to do. Just give me the camera, I'll shoot. I don't like try to like get bogged down by the tech stuff. I'm usually more like the guy who's talking to the actors. And then when the camera comes, I'm just like, oh, how do I use a follow focus, Joel? Teach me.
Cool. So now that we're winding down here, I guess my next question would be to you, Dan, is like, what is the future for Dan Lotz 922? Oh, sorry, not 92. Sorry, $5 Film School, and what you are hoping to achieve in the future? Because it's been 5 years. You clearly have had success, regardless of how you've had it. It's a measurable point from here to here, right? It's a graph. It is success. What is your plans for the future? And I guess, like, obviously, what is a realistic goal? Not like a dream goal, because everybody wants to be, directing Oppenheimer type of thing, but like what is a
Yeah.
realistic goal for you within the next few years?
I I would hope 5 to 10 years out that I have 100,000 followers and I'm like at a point where like maybe I'm not doing this full time, but maybe I'm approaching a point where like half of my income is coming from like YouTube and that like kind of space. I think that's pretty realistic considering like I've always heard that the first 10,000 is the hardest to get and then it kind of comes a little easier. Um I think that's a realistic goal for myself. And then in terms of like from a creative perspective, I'm working on a new project initiative. I don't even know what the fuck I'm gonna call it. I hope this swearing isn't a big deal.
No, fuck.
I
Fuck, 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 fuck,
but
fuck.
like I'm coming up with a new idea. I see a sort of an opening, and I'm trying to be vague just because it's like this will be something that'll be coming out kind of soon. I see an opening in the marketplace for something really interesting in terms of like free feature films coming out on YouTube, and I kind of want to fill that gap, and I'm
Right.
excited to see what will happen with it. But like, my hope is that within the next 365 days I'll launch this idea and then I'll be kind of headed towards it. There will probably be a rebranding of the YouTube channel coming around the corner.
From $5 film school to something else.
Yes, probably. There's
Nice.
I've been strongly considering it. I'm just kind of weighing all my options right now, but I have a feeling there will be a rebranding of the channel within the next year.
What? You guys are getting a lot of firsts in this fucking conversation. That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. You know,
Yeah.
where does Dan want to be? Like where does Dan really want to be? Because funny enough, the way that we got in touch with each other was I was on your live stream, like as a guest, and I sent you a message or whatever, and then we followed each other on Instagram, and that's how we got here. But you were talking about how you were kind of like sad by the fact that you hadn't done as much recently. And, it's nice to hear you getting back to it. But like, what is like kind of like what inspired you to kind of like get back to like the level of Dan Lotz that we've seen in these last, few weeks and months, you know?
Um, I think it was just meeting some really good people. There were some really good people who entered my life for a season for a time that kind of like reawakened my love of film. And I think like sometimes you go through like a depression, and I think I was definitely depressed for a bit there. And I think like sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you and one person to like convey that to you, and I had a series of friends that all were kind of like helping me through that. And I think like that kind of inspired me to wake up and be like, okay, like I have something special here, I have a lot of things that are awesome here. And not being so negative on myself and being like, hey, there's some great stuff here, I just got to get it out to the people.
Yeah, Dan, I think you have something special here, and I think a lot of people support you, including myself, and I think that you should get the fuck back to work.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's the
get
goal. The
out of your
goal
own fucking shit and get back to work. I,
Yeah.
I am telling you this in the coach way, All right,
Yeah.
all right, all right, all right. Get over it, get back into it, because yeah, like it was seeing somebody. There really isn't a method, on you. There really with folk filmmaking or YouTube filmmakers, we really don't have our own space yet. But I feel that, over the next few years, that space is definitely going to be coming around the corner very soon. You know,
Yeah.
and it's
It
not always going
feels
to
like a
be the team.
big gap right now. It feels like there's like there it feels like there's just like one person or a set of people is going to fill that gap, and it's like right now it feels like it's a race to get to that. And I
Yeah,
feel like in any space, usually when there is a hole in the market, usually someone will fill it once they have the right product or the right thing. And I hope to be one of the people that does that. I think there's a lot of really talented people, and I'm really excited to see like who's going to rise to the occasion with this sort of new era of filmmaking.
I definitely believe that the next Steven Spielberg, George Lucas era is about to begin, but through, YouTube, I guess, or something
Yeah,
equivalent to that. Because we haven't had the equivalent of Steven Spielberg on YouTube. if that makes sense, you know. And I definitely think that that's coming soon, sooner rather than later.
And that's kind of where the rebranding and the mindset that I'm coming from is I do feel like we are hitting a very similar period to like the 90s or the 70s with like the new film movements that had happened at the time. you know I really feel like the next wave is like upon us. It's just waiting for us to grasp it.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, man. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Dan. Thank you so much for your time and this hour-long conversation. I hope that the audiences at home or the filmmakers at home got some sort of benefit from our conversation. Like, I'm going to leave the last, 2 minutes here to you. Is there anything that you want to share with your audience? Any links? Any, subscribe here bullshit?
Yeah, I mean, you can check out if you'd want to $5 Film School. We got a bunch of free movies out there that are literally just being waiting to be watched. Other than that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think my biggest thing would just be to challenge the audience to go out and make their own stuff. Like my stuff's cool to watch, but I'd much rather a lot of these people go and work on their own shit.
You got it here. All right, guys. Like Dan said, go work on your own shit and stop watching this podcast, okay? So, Raul A of BulletCatchFilms, and I'm sure from $5 Film School. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you guys next time. Adios.
Bye.